started, if we will, turn to hymn number 93. Hymn number 93 in your old American Baptist hymn. You know what? Let's all stand on this song too for a while. We're going to do all three verses of this as well. Turn to hymn number 187. Hymn number 187. Same book. Same. We'll do all three verses of this.
Thank you.
number 114. 114. You know what? Let's stand on this last song as well. If you can, let's stand.
Specials tonight, Miss Claire, Joe. I invite your attention tonight to John chapter 13, and while you're making your way over there to John chapter 13, prayer requests tonight due to remember these on our prayer list. Russell Ransom, Miss Winona, she's here tonight and doing a little better. But remember George's dad, George Drake Sr., he fell. They think he might have broke his foot. So remember him in prayer. And Lori Barton was mentioned this morning. So others, do you have others you'd like to share this evening? Your crew still traveling, Joe, or are they still?
Yeah, they should be home any minute.
Look at that smile. You'll see that? Miss them, Doc. Sorry. Others, prayer requests, anyone?
Praise that Joe and I showed impressive level of patience this afternoon with the church man.
Yeah, that band will do it, right? You know, so.
I think I know how they are.
All right. Any other? Let's go to the word of prayer, and Curtis, would you lead us tonight?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for everything you do for us, Father, and thank you for allowing us to be here to worship you tonight. And Lord, learn more about you tonight, Father. Just pray to you about prayer requests, all those that were mentioned this morning, Father, and those that are already on the list. Just pray to you those in a special way. Just thank you for the week that we've had today, Father. Just pray that you can just continue to make it the week that we need, and just pray that we can do anything that we can to provide the people around us with the knowledge of you, Father. Just pray that you can lead us through this week and just give us the comfort that we need to get through the week, Father. We ask all these things in Christ's name. Amen.
John chapter 13 tonight, and the title of the message is The Servant Spirit. We continue on being a servant, pick that back up. It's been a while, but John chapter 13, we'll begin reading from verse 1 through verse 17. It says, Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he was come from God, and went to God. He riseth from supper, and laid aside his garments, and took a towel, and girded himself. After that he poured water into a basin, and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel wherewith he was girded. Then cometh he to Simon Peter, and saith unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Jesus answered and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. Peter said unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter saith unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus saith to him, He that is washed needeth not, save to wash his feet, but is clean every whit. And ye are clean, but not all. For he knew who should betray him, therefore he said, You're not all clean. So after he had washed their feet, and had taken his garments, and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? You call me Master and Lord, and ye say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If you know these things, happy are ye if you do them. To be effective in the Lord's service, we must willingly take the role of a servant. Jesus' disciples had a hard time learning this, and I think we do too sometimes. Even the most seemingly godly and spiritual people, sometimes when we're called to do something, we might rebel because deep inside we think, well, that's beneath my dignity. Samuel L. Bringle was a guy a pastor, a brilliant orator who was a successful pastor, but he became so burdened by the plight of the inner city poor that he resigned his church and joined the Salvation Army. He was going to make a difference there in London, and soon after being inducted, he had the greatest of plans of what he was going to do, but he was given the task of cleaning a pile of muddy boots. That's not really what he thought he was signed up for. That's not really what he got in the Salvation Army for, what the job that he was looking for, but that's the job. And he said, this is too much. Inwardly, he said, I rebelled. He said, but then I thought about how Jesus washed the feet of his disciples. He then asked the Lord to give him a spirit servant, and he went on to clean the boots and went on to have a faithful ministry. Wrote many books, I understand, as well. But many times we as God's people, even sometimes preachers and pastors, we feel like we're too good to get our hands dirty for the Lord. Sometimes we're afraid of those things, and the New Testament is full of information, as we see, that shows the life of Jesus, that shows what a servant he was, and what he did, and where he went, and who he was on the inside, and the kind of spirit that he had. And he had within Jesus, a servant spirit. A spirit that he was willing to serve, that he obediently served, that he was looking for opportunities to serve. But not only that, he's leaving his disciples behind, and so he wanted to lead them and show them what a servant does. Remember, you can tell somebody, but the best way is to show somebody. And that's what Jesus did with this lesson tonight. He could have just told them, but we know about Jesus, and we only have the words about Jesus of himself in Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 and 29. He says, Come unto me, all ye that labor and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you shall find rest for your souls. Jesus could have said, I'm all powerful. wise, of all knowing, but he didn't. Even though these are his attributes, he could have said, I'm great and I'm worthy to be worshipped. He said, I am meek and lowly in heart. Meek means gentle. It's a horse that has been broken and tamed. And we've probably all been around a horse that wasn't broken. We had a guy who trained walking horses right behind our house there, and I saw many a guy come over to break the horse get broke. Get thrown off. But you know, they would keep working with that horse and bring it under control. And having all that strength under control, having all that strength to be able to but yet not acting out. So someone who would, the word lowly or humble carries the idea of stooping low. It was used of a household servant, someone who would stoop over the cooking or serving the meal or washing the clothes. It has nothing to do with insignificance or weakness, but rather depicts someone who stoops low in order to serve another. You know, and sometimes we have trouble with that. Well, here in our story tonight, in the background scene before us, occurred in the first century there in Jerusalem. Paved roads were few. And they were really unheard of in most cities. You didn't have paved roads. The roads were like winding dirt trails covered with a thick layer of dust. My niece is over in Israel, and she got to go on a trip over there. And I said, one thing you're going to notice is how thick the dust is over there. Just kind of clings and sticks to your shoes. Real thick dust. And so, but when it rains, those same paths become liquid slush and thick mud. So it was custom, therefore, for the host, if you were going to host something, to provide a servant at the door of your home to wash the feet of the dinner guests who arrived. You know, much like we'd take the person's coat or they might take their shoe, they would wash their feet. Okay? And it was a custom that they did, and the servant with a pitcher of water and a pan and a towel would wash the dirt or mud off the feet of the guest. And before they prepared, so they could prepare to enter the home. The shoes were left at the door, which is still a prevalent custom in the East. And so, if a servant or slave was not available, then one of the early arriving guests would take this role. Okay, so this was kind of the background. And what's interesting is that at this, no one volunteered for that lowly task. You know, people aren't lined up to clean toilets in the church. I can tell you that. So the room was filled with proud hearts and dirty feet, as someone said. Disciples were willing to fight over the throne, but not over the towel. They wanted to reign, but they didn't want to stoop. Okay, so let's notice the servant spirit here tonight. First of all, we see the event of Jesus' humility. It's just before the feast of the Passover. This was the most important feast on the Jewish calendar. All 12 disciples and Jesus are present. The place is somewhere in an upper room in Jerusalem, and it is the setting where Jesus will give his final words, basically, to his disciples. Very special night, a lot of things going on that night. And so this is the event of Jesus' humility. Secondly, we see the example. In the middle of this quiet meal, something strange happens. Jesus, without a word, left his dinner, picked up his towel. And sometimes the most effective rebuke is a silent one. And so the contrast between the heated words of the disciples arguing over who's the greatest, and all of this going on against the cool splash of water must have been striking. But we learned that, listen, being a servant, first of all, being a servant is unannounced. We don't have to announce, hey, look what I did. We don't have to post selfies. We don't have to put it on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff, Being a servant is unannounced. Jesus didn't say, men, I'm going to demonstrate servanthood. Watch my humility over here. That kind of pride was a trademark of the Pharisees. And unlike the others, the Messiah slipped away from the table, quietly pulled off his outer tunic with towel and pitcher in his hand, and he began to wash his disciples' feet. Now they reclined when they ate, leaning on one elbow. I don't know if you've ever seen this. If you've ever been to, has anybody ever been to, they used to have a display of this at the Ripley's, believe it or not, in Dallas. My sister lived out there. We went out there and they showed the disciples reclined around the table. It was a very low table. It probably wasn't any higher than that step right there. And they were reclined with their hand, their arm down like this, with their feet. And if your neighbor had dirty feet, you knew about it. I mean, you just did. Okay, and that's the way they. You see the Lord's Supper, the nice sitting up at the table. That isn't the way they ate. You know? I'm sorry, but that's not the way they. That's not the way they dined. I know it's depicted as that, but if you look at the customs, you'll see that. All right, so they in this position meant that their feet were out and everybody knew it. But Jesus was sovereign, yet he took the place of a servant. He had all things in his hand, yet he picked up a towel. He was Lord and Master, yet he served his Father. As someone said, humility is not thinking meanly of yourself. It's not thinking of yourself at all. And he wasn't thinking of himself at all. He wanted to show them what a servant does. Thirdly, we see the effect of Jesus' holiness here. In verses 6 to 11, as Peter watched the Lord wash his friend's feet, he became more and more disturbed. You see, being a servant includes receiving graciously as well as giving graciously. How many of you have a hard time accepting something? Come on, I know you. So we raise it. Yeah, raise your hand. I know. I'm going up. I got my hand up too. We have a hard time, don't we, sometimes? Brotherhood blessed me with a phone. I had a hard time with that, you know. Well, I can do it myself, you know. But listen, being a servant sometimes includes receiving. So Peter said unto him, he said, you know, the Lord came to him. He said, you don't really understand what I'm doing, but you will. Peter said, you're not going to wash my feet. What? The Lord said, if I don't wash thee, if I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. And Simon said unto him, then, you know, Peter just killed me. You know? I mean, if you don't think that this bunch was a colorful bunch, he said, well, wash me all over then, Lord. I mean, you guys are one extreme to the other extreme, you know. And so being willing to receive sometimes takes more grace than given to others. And so servanthood is hard, especially when it calls for receiving from someone else. Jesus was not trying to teach his disciples. He was trying to teach them the importance of walking holy. The word in verse 8 and verse 12 and verse 14 for wash is nipto in the Greek. And the word nipto means to wash part of the body. But the word washed in John chapter 13, verse 10 is a different word, and the word is luo in the Greek. It means to bathe all over. So what is the Lord saying? Well, when the sinner trusts Jesus, we are bathed all over and our sins are washed away together. But why is that important that we keep our feet clean? Why does he mention this washing in verse 8? Anybody know? Okay. All right. The word part, he says here, the word part there means participation. In other words, having a share in someone or something. When God bathes us in salvation, he brings about a union with Christ that is a settled relationship. It is a once and for all settled relationship. However, our communion, fellowship with Christ, depends on keeping ourselves unspotted. Now the picture is this: when the priest would go, he would wash all over. How many times? Once. But he washed his hands over and over. That's the idea here, okay? We're saved once. But listen, for us to be clean in fellowship, we have to confess our sins. If we permit unconfessed sin in our lives, with our walk with the Lord, that's where we need to be cleansed. And we see that in the high priest. He was washed all over once. He may wash his hands or feet several times. But when Peter discovered that to refuse the Lord meant to lose the Lord's fellowship, he went the opposite direction and said, give me a bath all over. And the Lord said, no, you don't need that. You're missing the point, Peter. You're missing the point. we see in this, being a servant is not a sign of inner weakness, but incredible strength. You know, it takes a lot to be a servant. It takes a lot of strength. Jesus had to use strong words for Peter to understand. In verse 13, he said, "You call me Master and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, you ought also to wash one another's feet." You see, Jesus didn't throw him a curveball. He began by starting his role of authority among them as Master and Teacher and Lord. Now, what would you expect him to say? You expect him to say, "Now, you wash my feet." That's not what he said. What did he say? He said, "You wash each other's feet." "I know you wash my feet," he said, "but what about the stinking guy next to you? What about his feet?" You see, you don't just pick and choose to be servants to people that may be of a higher rank. You say, well, of course I'll do, because they're this person that has all this life. No, what about the lowliest of the low? What about somebody that's homeless? What about being a servant to them? It's easy to be a servant to people in our church. We love them, we care about them, we take a meal, we do these things, but what about people out there? See? It's so easy sometimes to, well, I'm a servant, I took a meal to somebody in the church. What about people who don't have anything to eat? See? But sometimes we want to pick and choose, but which one of us would not stand in line to wash Jesus' feet? But that's not what he said. The fact Jesus wanted was that they wash one another's feet. He left an example of what we need to do to have a servant's heart. And listen, everything that Jesus shows him here, it's a picture of being a servant. Everything that he did with his life and what he did is not preferring himself and not putting himself at the front of the line. And he's trying to pour into these disciples, hey, you need to be a servant because, listen, I'm about to leave. And what's going to happen to you group? What's going to happen to you group of guys? You group of 11 that's going to go on. What's going to happen? If you don't get this servanthood down, then not much is going to happen. But I think they got the lesson, don't you? We read through the book of Acts. We see them serving. We see them being servants before the Lord. We see them being humble servants. But what about us tonight? What about in our lives? There's 3 applications I want to make tonight in this. First of all, servant spirit means a personal involvement. See, you can't serve at arm's length. You got to get in there and have personal involvement as a servant. Personal involvement. Jesus got in there, slipped up from the table. Nobody really knew. Nobody said, well, what's he doing? He didn't announce, hey, I'm going over here. Hey, I'm pouring water. Hey, I'm about to wash your feet. He didn't do that. But he got in there and he got done. I don't think it was on Facebook either. Pretty sure. Servant spirit requires Christ-like unselfishness. He says, for I've given you, verse 15, an example that you should do as I have done. Everything Jesus did was for our example. People say, well, why do I need to be baptized? What's the point? Because we follow Jesus' example. Did Jesus have to be baptized? No, it teaches obedience. It teaches us to follow the Lord, to do His will, to do what He asks us to do in the Word of God. They that gladly receive the Word were baptized. It's the pattern. So, a servant spirit requires Christ-like unselfishness, not thinking about ourselves, not thinking about, hey, how's this serving God? Thirdly, a servant spirit will yield happiness. Verse 17, if you know these things, happy if you do. No, he said happy if you do. If you do. A servant spirit will yield true happiness and joy in our life. Listen, when you give your time to serve other people, there's a joy like nothing else that you can imagine. And some people never know that. They're too busy wanting to be served rather than looking for opportunities to serve. You know, some of the greatest times we've had here at Journey is when we've been out on projects serving. We went to Miss Sanders' house. And I have to say this. I believe that when we went to her house, she'd been coming here for years, talking on with Miss Ronald. I think that changed her mind toward our church from then on. Just us being a servant. Just us getting together, going to her house, doing things, little things like that. Ladies who have service, y'all do projects, y'all do a host of things. Do they matter? They do matter. The Bible says there's happiness, there's joy. Man, somebody said this, and I'll end on this tonight. If you're too big to do little things, then you're too little to do big things. If you're too big to do little things, then you're too little to do big things. Listen, you don't have to be big to do big things. As I recall, there was a little guy, a little as some people call him, a little boy, who gave his lunch up. Look what the Lord did with that. You know what he was doing? He was being a servant. He was willing to give. He was willing to share. He was willing to be obedient. Listen, folks, that's what being a servant's all about. Being willing. And taking that opportunity. God's going to open up a door for you this week to be able to notice it. Maybe we walk through it. And listen, it will make a difference, the Lord said. Do you likewise? Yeah, you can do it around here, and that's good. But do it out there. For the lost world, that will make a difference in them. They will see. They will know. As we stand tonight and have an invitation tonight, I don't know your heart tonight. I don't know where we stand in the, as far as our heart's desire to serve. Only the Lord knows that tonight. I don't have that ability. But you know, some people say, well, I just don't like serving. Then for you, I pray, Lord, give me a servant's desire. Give me a servant's heart. Give me a servant's will. But I like serving. I think it brings a joy in our life when you serve others. Now listen, it's not about the money. It's not about the fame. It's not about the making a name for our church. It's about doing what the Lord asks us to do tonight, being a servant. As we stand tonight,